military information, newspaper article.
We'll get underway here soon, folks. Good evening, Mr. Dixon. Hi, Michael. You know, my computer clock says it's 6:31. Why don't we go ahead and get underway? It's my privilege to introduce the Reverend Dr. Sam Mann, who has headed up this program in terms of reframing the race question in America. And really appreciate what you've done, Reverend Mann. And we have a special guest tonight, whom Sam, my dear friend, will introduce. And but I think you've got an opening statement, Reverend Mann. So why don't you proceed, if you would?
Thank you, Brother Tex. I want to thank you for inviting me to coordinate these wonderful speakers that we have been very fortunate to hear over these past few weeks, 4 weeks, I think. And I want to thank Trinity United Methodist Church for considering the sponsorship of the seminar, Reframing the Dialogue on Race in America. I'm going to very briefly do a little introduction here and remind everybody that Reframing the Dialogue on Race in America is a project that was begun in 1997, thought up the inspiration of the Reverend Dr. Mac Charles Jones, the pastor of St. Stephen Baptist Church, and then became the Associate General Secretary of the National Council of Churches before he passed away very unexpectedly. Brother Jones was a very dear and close friend of mine and comrade in the struggle for justice and mercy. The idea for the Reframing the Dialogue grew out of that heinous time when we were experiencing a rash of the burnings of Black churches, all done by young white men, primarily in the South. And though it wasn't limited to the South. And Mac said to me once, he said, we need to make a response. We need to make a response that's more than just a complaint. And so he says, I would like to focus a training, a seminar type setting on the white church. And later on, he brought in a black response to the burning of black churches. But the beginning was reframing had to do with primarily focusing on the white church. And he turned to me and said, "It's your job to organize this reframing." So those of you who knew Mac knew he was a very imposing man. And I told him, I said, "Yes, sir, whatever you say." And so we began the national coalition, the national Reframing the Dialogue on Race in America project. It grew out of the burning of the black churches back in 1997. The first of all the seminars was held right here in Kansas City at the St. Paul School of Theology. And there's an article in the newspaper that you can Google, I'm pretty sure, on reframing the dialogue that tells about our project and what we attempted to do. Basically, 5 things. One, to review the history of white supremacy in America, and especially to review the solutions that we had. It was to integrate the cultural and social institutions of America. And we decided that's not a good thing because the social and cultural institutions of America are corrupt. The outgrowth of that was to also bring in the notion of the history of America and to make the claim that we needed to rewrite the history of America, not only to include stories that have been omitted, but also to tell the place of white supremacy attending violence in America's founding moments and documents. The third was to bring the issue of race and white supremacy into the therapeutic setting of counseling, to examine white supremacy as a defining spirit, to examine white supremacy as a defining spirit of the white personality and how it contributed to the pathology of being white. Then the fourth one was to reframe the dialogue on reparations as a condition for racial reconciliation. And then we were going to try to build a community of support around these 4 commitments. However, Brother Jones died very suddenly, and I think much of what the National Council of Churches was about, and especially this project, also was waned away. So we have rebirthed this here at Trinity. It's not been far from us, but we have rebirthed it, and hopefully we will be able to get some legs back under it and get some actions done. We've had 2. I made one speech, and I'm not going to include myself in this austere group, but we had 2 wonderful speakers, Cornel Pewewardy of the Kiowa Comanche Nation from Oklahoma, who talked about rewriting history from other perspectives, and basically saying there was somebody already here before Columbus got here. And we know the very fine book by Ivan Van Sertima, They Came Before Columbus, that you might want to read. But Cornel of the Kiowa Comanche Nation was our first speaker. Then the second one was Kamm Howard of the National Coalition of Reparations in Cobra, and he was last week and did a wonderful and marvelous job. And now tonight we're going to follow up on the in Cobra suggestion about reparations, as we bring our brother and colleague, local voice and activists around reparations in the local arena in Kansas City. Mickey represents the Kansas City Reparations Coalition. The male co-chair is Will Bowles, and the female co-chair is Justice Gatson. And Mickey Dean, his bio is in our on our screen, and I refer that to you. I will not go into all of that, but Mickey Dean has been an activist for as long as I have known him. He jokes with me all the time, and he's always catching me. So I'm going to joke with him. I got a little moment here. Mickey Dean was born in Sandersville, Georgia. Sandersville, Georgia. Now you say, well, what does that got to do with anything? Well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was also born in Sandersville, Georgia. That's a pretty good recommendation. But the thing I want to say is, my mama was born in Sandersville, Georgia, which I think is even more a recommendation. And I want to say to him tonight, I'm so glad we met. I'm so glad we are friends. And I'm so glad that you're on the case for reparations here in Kansas City, Missouri. Let us welcome tonight one of the great voices, one of the great spirits.
Come on, Sam.
No, you shut up. I'm talking. One of the great voices and great spirits for reparations in America, Mickey Dean. Mickey Dean. Let's give Mickey a hand. Yeah,
Thank you,
that's
Sam.
good.
I appreciate it. And I just want to add to Sam's story that he actually, when he went to Washington County, Sandersville, he had a chance to meet my parents, and who are both deceased now. But after Sam visited with them, every time I call home, how's that white preacher doing? You know, they'd always ask about Sam. You know, so but anyway, thanks, Sam, and I'm glad to be here, particularly to discuss what I think is a very significant issue, reparations. Reparations has been in the news a lot lately. Some of you all may have heard about the vote in California. I won't get into that yesterday, which was debating a very significant question in the reparations movement. I can tell you that 10, 12 years ago, if we mentioned reparations to people, Black people, white people, you kind of get the side eye. People will say, yeah, you know, Black people deserve reparations, but it's never going to happen. And there just wasn't much momentum in the reparations movement. A lot of that began to change, I would say, for the first time in 2014. There was an article that was written by Ta-Nehisi Coates in the Atlantic magazine on reparations. And if you haven't read that, it's online, the Atlantic magazine. I think it was June 2014 by Ta-Nehisi Coates. on reparations. And that article garnered a lot of attention, and it created a lot of discussion about reparations. And it began to bring that issue to the forefront a little bit. I think one of the next significant things that happened was that during the 2020 presidential campaign, or particularly the Democratic primary, if you recall, a lot of the Democratic candidates said that if president, they would support reparations. Now, one of those people that said that was Joe Biden. And of course, we just haven't heard much from him since he's been president, but we're still pushing that. And then I think lastly, the George Floyd situation, I think spurred a lot of movement in the Black community. And of course, reparations was one of the issues that was pushed to the forefront after that. So the issue of reparations now, it is in the public sphere. We don't get those funny looks anymore when we talk about reparations. I still think that there are a lot of people who are doubtful, who are skeptic, who have some skepticism about reparations, about the potential success of the movement. But we're optimistic because we're seeing cracks already in terms of institutions, educational institutions like Georgetown, for example, acknowledging their role in slavery. There are religious institutions now that are examining their role in slavery, and they're setting up reparations funds. Even here in our area, William Jewell, they've been doing research. They actually have a commission that's doing research into William Jewell's history, and they discovered that William Jewell himself and most of the founders of William Jewell were slave owners, and that there are buildings on the campus that were built with enslaved labor. So they're looking to see how they can make restitution. So my point is that that people really understand that reparations is something that is deserved by Black people, and there are efforts to try to achieve that. Kamm talked about HR 40 in Congress, so I won't go into that. But what I really want to focus on tonight is local reparations. What are we doing here in Kansas City? What type of demands for reparatory justice are we making, and how do we justify those demands? Before I do that, though, I don't know if you all have ever had an opportunity to hear some of the basic history of the reparations movement and how we got to this point. So I want to take just a very few minutes to talk about just how we got up to this point for reparations. And the first slide is the next one, please, sir. I like that way you open that curtain. A lot of y'all, I'm sure, have heard this notion of 40 acres and a mule. And I know for a long time, a lot of people thought that was just a piece of mythology, but it was an actual thing. What happened was, after Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, and this was before the end of the Civil War, he knew that once all of these enslaved Africans were finally emancipated, the question was, well, what are we going to do with them? Here we are freeing people who basically have no education. They don't have any independent economy. And so what are we going to do with them? So prior to the end of the Civil War, he dispatched General Sherman, who was one of his generals, to Savannah, Georgia. And General Sherman had a meeting with about 20 Black ministers in Savannah, Georgia. The question was, once you all are emancipated, what do you want? How can you take care of yourself? What do we need to do? Now, these ministers didn't ask for a voting rights bill. They didn't ask for fair housing. They didn't ask for a Supreme Court justice. I don't even know if there was a Supreme Court then. But what they said was, we want land. If you give us land, you give us the provisions to work the land for a period of about 20 years, and we think that we can be on our own. The second question posed to them was, well, do you really want to be integrated into this society, or do you want to be on your own by yourselves as Black people? They said, just give us the land and let us be on our own, and we can take care of ourselves. General Sherman took that back to Lincoln. and Lincoln agreed. And General Sherman issued what was known as Field Order 15. Field Order 15 basically allotted 400,000 acres of land that was confiscated from the Confederate leaders. And this was land that went from Charleston, South Carolina, all the way down to Jacksonville, Florida, along the coast, 30 miles inland, 400,000 land. That land was designated to Black people. And some of the formerly enslaved Africans after the Civil War began to move on that land, began to set up homesteads on that land. And in fact, we're doing fine. Unfortunately, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Andrew Johnson became president. Andrew Johnson was sympathetic to the Confederacy, and he rescinded Field Order 15, and all of the land was taken from the formerly enslaved Africans. They were moved off the land, and the land was given back to the Confederate owners. So this was the first instance where Black people actually did have reparations, and it was taken. And there's been a lot of calculations about in today's dollars what that land would be worth, and it's a tremendous amount of money. But as you can see, here was an opportunity for Black people to have an economic floor, something to build on, and it was stripped away from them. And that's when, and of course, Reconstruction in it, and we went into the Jim Crow era. Next slide, please. Now, there's a long history in the reparations movement, which I'm not going to go into because I really want to focus on the local movement. But I do want to tell you a little bit about the modern reparations movement. Some of y'all may have heard of Queen Mother Moore. Queen Mother Moore is an interesting figure. She lived to be, I think, about 96 years old. Her activist career started in the United Negro Improvement Association, which was Marcus Garvey's organization. And she was active in our movement up until the last time that I had an opportunity to see her was in 1995 at the Million Man March. She was one of the speakers at the Million Man March. So she had a long, distinguished career. And Queen Mother Moore has been sort of deemed the founder of the modern reparations movement. She went to the United Nations in 1957. And she presented a petition to the United Nations which demanded land and billions of dollars in reparations for people of African descent. And she also asked for support for Africans that wanted to go back to Africa. In 1963, she founded the Committee for Reparations for Descendants of US slaves. She was also a founder of the Republic of New Africa. But she was one of the early activists in the reparations movement, and we consider her the mother of the modern reparations movement. Next, in Cobra, you all heard from Kamm Howard last week. As Sam said, Kamm is the male co-chair in Cobra, and Cobra was founded in 1987, and it was basically founded to broaden the base of support for the reparations movement. There were a lot of individuals and organizations that supported reparations. And and Cobra was an attempt to bring all of those groups together and form some type of a national coalition for reparations. And it is still one of the leading organizations in reparations today. And then there's the National African American Reparations Commission. This was formed in 2015, led by Ron Daniels. And it's sort of an umbrella organization designed to coordinate all of the organizations and individuals in the reparations movement. So that's just a little bit. And of course, our organization, National Black United Front, we were founded in 1980. Reparations is part of our Constitution. Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Nation of Islam, started talking about reparations back in 1950. So there's been others who have promoted reparations over the years, but these are three that I want to point out. Next slide, please. There's a lot of discussion, and I don't know if you all paid attention to this debate about who should be eligible for reparations, but there's a lot of discussions about who should be eligible for reparations. And so when we hear the term reparations, I think two things come to mind. One is reparations being payment for free labor and slavery. And it absolutely is payment for free labor and slavery. There's an estimate that the value of enslaved Black people in 1860 in today's dollars is $22 trillion. Okay, so people start talking about can we quantify the damage in terms of finances? Well, those enslaved Africans were valued at $22 trillion. The value of uncompensated labor from 1619 to 1865 is estimated to be about $50 trillion. Okay, $50 trillion. And I also should mention, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act was put in place in 1860s, and what it did was it distributed 246 million acres of land to 1.5 million families for 6 years. Now, this was the effort of the United States as they continued to take Native people's land. And so what they wanted to do was populate further west. And so they offered families these 250 million acres. The problem is that almost 100% of that land, I think something like 99.7% went to white families, okay? Black people, and if you read the Homestead Act, there's nothing in there about race or anything like that. It was supposed to be the families that were moving west, but 97% of that land went to white people. And what's interesting is that it's estimated that today there are 93 million white Americans who are direct beneficiaries of the Homestead Act. So, you know, when you hear people talk about Black people asking for affirmative action, well, this is one of the first and most extensive affirmative action programs for white folks. And this is how so many white families today can claim their value through the Homestead Act. Also, after reparations, after the Civil War, we went through this period of Reconstruction, a brief period where it looked like America was going to do right by Black people, but they didn't. And after the Great Compromise, we entered the Jim Crow era. And I think we all know what happened to Black people during the Jim Crow era. We went to another form of slavery, which was sharecropping. There was convict labor where Black folks was arrested for just anything, loitering or whatever. They were locked up, and then they were leased out to plantations to do free work. We all know about the lynching of Black people, the theft of land. Some of y'all may have heard about the recent incident in California at Bruce's Beach, where the land that was confiscated from Black families, this Black family has been returned to them. And that's happened all over the United States, by the way. Black folks lost land through all kinds of chicanery, through terror. But I think the National Bar Association estimated that back in 1900, Black folks owned several million acres of land. That has dwindled to this day, and most of it, Black people were driven out because of terror, or the land was taken from them, and just a lot of sleight of hand type of methods. Employment discrimination that Black folks have suffered from. Another important piece is you all remember the Social Security Act. Well, what's interesting about the Social Security Act is that it did not exclude Black people, but the Southern legislators, in order to support the Social Security Act, had put in place that domestics and agricultural workers would be excluded. Well, the problem is that 80% of Black labor at that time were either domestics or agricultural workers. So they were not able to take advantage of the Social Security Act until the 50s, because the plantation owners felt that they had another source of income other than work for them, that it would interfere with the Southern economy. So it's really important to understand that, you know, we talk about the programs from the Roosevelt administration, the New Deal. For Black people, it wasn't until later on that they were able to take advantage of the New Deal. Same with the GI Bill. The GI Bill was a program that was for soldiers coming home from World War II. They were able to get money for mortgages. They were able to get money for college education, for tuition. Only 2% of the money from the GI Bill went to Black soldiers. So again, you know, when we ask about how did white folks get ahead, well, it's things like this is how they got ahead. You know, it ain't that white folks worked any harder than Black people. They had every advantage to get ahead. and of course, you know, a lot of the descendants of these people, when you mention something like affirmative action, you know, they'll say, well, you know, you can't do that to Black people. That's not, then they start quoting Martin Luther King, you know, that kind of thing. But it's really important to understand, in addition to the role that slavery played in creating wealth in America, also the role that these so-called New Deal programs played in creating wealth for our immediate ancestors, okay? Because we're talking about, you know, our parents, you know, my parents who were not able to take advantage of that. So we're talking about in recent history. And also in terms of the wealth gap, I think that I think it was 2016, the average net worth of Black family was $11,000 compared to white families' average net worth of almost $142,000. And there's been studies that have shown that if we basically do the kind of programs that are on the books now in terms of the racial justice programs, affirmative action, all of those kind of things, it would take 228 years, okay? 228 years to close that wealth gap. Now, most of us don't have 228 years. And so what that tells us is that without massive intervention, that wealth gap will continue to grow. And what massive intervention are we talking about? We're talking about reparations and reparatory justice, okay? Next slide. What forms should reparations take, or can they take? And there's a lot of answers to this. Of course, the first thing you hear about is, where's my check? You know, cut the check. Well, direct payments is obviously a form of reparatory justice, but we're talking about things like land. We're talking about things like community development funds. Should Black people have a period of tax relief, free health care, funds for home building, education scholarships? I mean, there's just a number of forms that reparations can take, and that is something that nationally HR 40 will deal with, and locally that is something that our commission, which I'll talk about in a minute, will deal with. Next slide, please. Now, that's a little bit of history. What I want to talk about now is what we're doing here in Kansas City. And in November of 2020, we formed the KC Reparations Coalition, which is made up of a number of civil rights and activist organizations in Kansas City. In the spring of last year, we were able to get the city council to pass an ordinance in support of HR 40, which is the reparations bill in Congress. The council passed it unanimously. Of course, they didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to shell out any money. So that was kind of that wasn't much of a heavy lift for the council, but still we thought it was significant that they supported this resolution unanimously. And then in June or July of last year, I'm getting some daily news on my computer, and I hear about this group called Mayors Organized for Reparations and Equity. It's a group of 11 mayors that decided to come together to say, you know, we support reparations on the national level, but we think that cities can lead the way in showing how reparations can work. And lo and behold, one of the mayors listed was Quentin Lucas. This is a surprise to me because Mayor Lucas knew about our reparations coalition, had never approached us about reparations, and I had heard him on the radio once or twice talking about reparations, or not talking about it, but he was asked about reparations, and he just went in circles. I mean, he didn't give a direct answer, so we didn't know where he stood on reparations, and so we were actually shocked when we saw his name. But the fact that he had put his name out there in public saying that he supported local reparations, we said that let's hold him to it. And so we asked for a meeting with the mayor, our coalition, and he was gracious enough to meet with us. It was obvious that he had really no idea what he was going to do. And I'm still to this day not sure how he ended up on that list, but be it as it may, he did. But what we decided to do is that since he really didn't have an agenda, that we would provide an agenda for him. And so we had a good meeting with him and told him that we were going to develop some ideas in terms of how reparations should move forth in Kansas City. One of the things that the mayors decided, and they have a website that's still there, it's Mayors Organized for Reparations and Equity that you can look at. One of the things that they all agreed to do was to develop a commission of Black citizens to put together a plan for how local reparations should work. And so we had another meeting with the mayor about, I guess about 6 weeks ago. We discussed this commission and the fact that he had basically said he would form the commission. And we said, Mayor, what we'll do is we'll develop a proposal for your commission in terms of how it should be formed and what its duty should be. He agreed. And so that's what we're working on now. And we hope to get that to him. I think we gave ourselves the target of the end of this month, which is in a couple of days. And so we'll be circulating that our proposal internally in the coalition. We hope to present it to him maybe at some point next week. But in Kansas City, what we did was we took a look at what are the main problems that Black people face in Kansas City. And we narrowed it down to 5. And I just want to briefly go through those 5. And by the way, our 5, what we call injury areas, are very similar to what the other cities are doing. Remember that there are a number of cities that have local reparations initiatives in progress. And we were able to meet with them at a meeting in Evanston, Illinois last December, where all of the folks who are working on local reparations were able to get together and we were able to exchange ideas. And so we're all kind of on the same path, and we're trying to learn from each other. And most of those commissions that have been developed have pretty much the same 5 injury areas that we do. There may be a little bit of a difference, but most of them are the same. So one of the first one is this issue of home ownership. And home ownership is important because most families' wealth basically comes from home ownership. And the fact that we don't have wealth in the Black community, a lot of that has to do with the fact that our home ownership level is much lower than whites. And of course, some of the problems that you see is that we have been denied access, historically denied access to home ownership. You all know that the history of redlining in Black neighborhoods, where they actually drew a line around the neighborhoods that they would not provide loans to. And those neighborhoods were always in the Black community. There's mortgage lending discrimination. When I was working for the city, that was one of our jobs, was to investigate housing discrimination, including mortgage lending. It is still going on today. Predatory lending practices. If you recall, back in 2008, 2009, during the housing crisis, the mortgage crisis, Black folks were saddled with these subprime loans. And these were Black people who could, based on their income, credit history, they would do to get standard loans, but they were still pushed into the subprime market. As a result of that, a lot of them lost their homes. There was a lot of value lost in the community, in the Black community, during that 2008, 2009 period. You all know that J.C. Nichols had these restrictive covenants written into his properties, basically stating that these homes would never be sold to Black people. And I think there may have been some other people included. J.C. Nichols, by the way, not only did that here in Kansas City, but he was very influential nationally in putting racist restrictive covenants in these home ownership documents. I mentioned the GI Bill, the fact that Black folks were shut out of the GI Bill. That's where a lot of families got their initial money for mortgages. And this urban renewal, which is basically been called Negro removal, actually, because urban renewal was something that happened in every city. And basically it was a result of white folks moving out of the urban core into the suburbs, but they needed a way to get back into town to work. And so they started building these highways, mostly through the heart of the Black community. Highway 71 was such a highway. And some of y'all may know about all of the homes that were lost, Black homes that were lost in building Highway 71, Black businesses, et cetera. And the highway basically just cut through the heart of the Black community. And I also understand that it was something similar with I-70. Now, what we're doing with each one of these injuries is that we're identifying the problem. We're trying to identify who's responsible for the problem. And then the third step is what should reparatory justice look like? Okay, so in home ownership, we're talking about city government is part of the problem. And this is mainly because of their discriminatory land use and zone ordinances. This general disinvestment in the Black communities. We're talking about banks and other financial institutions that refuse home loans to Black people, real estate agencies, et cetera. So those are just some of the folks who are responsible. How to repair this. And by the way, this is something that the Mayor's Commission will dig deep into. This is just very surface stuff. We put this together without the benefit of a lot of research, but in order to really firm this up, there's going to have to be a lot of historical research done, because in order to make a demand for reparations, we want to present substantial evidence in terms of specifically what happened, be able to quantify that damage, and then present it and say, this is what happened to Black people, this is who did it, and this was the cost financially and economically to the Black community. So some of the ways that we're talking about repairing this is making use of these vacant lots by giving them to eligible Black families, and we'll determine that eligibility, providing a certain amount of money to Black families for construction of a home, making a down payment, Black families being given funds to upgrade their homes, and also training programs to educate Black people on home maintenance, et cetera. The next one is housing affordable to renters. Not everybody wants to own a home, but it's almost impossible. I mean, it's just getting harder and harder now to rent. The rents are going through the roof. And so the problem is that it's just very, very difficult now, even on an adequate income to afford some of the rents as they go up. And a lot of that has come through gentrification. What we see is developers coming in, building luxury housing, replacing low-income housing. And so there's a real dearth of affordable housing in Kansas City. And I will highlight the KC Tenants Group. They're doing a lot of excellent work in this area. Who's responsible? Of course, we've got the corporate landlords. Now, a lot of corporations are buying properties and basically raising the rents on those properties and renting them. And of course, we've got the gentrifiers coming into our community, these developers that are taking, demolishing in some instances low-income housing, but taking those properties and making them into expensive condos. How do we repair that? And some of the suggestions we have, as you see, is purchasing some of the affordable housing stock before it's demolished. We talked about public financing and community land trust. Social housing is a term that we're hearing a lot now. Investments in weatherization and other renewable materials, housing trust, and funds for that housing trust for houseless people. Next. Education, and of course, we all know about the problems in education in our community. Our schools have been historically underfunded through segregation, and not that there's some of us don't have an issue with segregation. What we have an issue with is the unequal funding of Black schools. There's been a tremendous amount of disinvestment in Black schools in terms of facilities, in terms of equipment like for science labs and those kind of things, which means that our students' achievement levels is low. We all know about the disciplinary measures in schools where our kids are disciplined much more harshly than white kids for the same offense. I've seen pictures of 8, 9-year-old kids that are in handcuffs because of behavior issues. And of course, you hear about the school to prison pipeline, no pre-K education, other problems. And then there's a Eurocentric curriculum. I mean, Black people ain't learning nothing about themselves. And of course, now there's this whole thrust against critical race theory, which most of these folks have no clue what it is, but basically they're trying to eliminate any discussion about what happened historically, what their people did to our people historically. They just don't want people to learn about it, because they figure if you don't learn about it, then you can't raise hell about it. The responsible parties are local school boards, superintendents, policymakers, particularly those who develop the funding policies for schools, basically where schools are financed by property taxes. And of course, if you're in an area where the property taxes, where you have more wealth, property taxes are going to be higher, and there's going to be more money for schools. So it's a very discriminatory method of financing schools. How to repair, and again, you see some examples there. I won't go through all of that, but free pre-K programs, free post-secondary education for Blacks, and again, changing the way schools are financed, trying to get these police out of the schools and have social workers instead. Next. There have been tremendous disparities in healthcare. Black folks have suffered from years of inadequate healthcare, lack of access to doctors and healthcare facilities in our neighborhoods. The Star did a story recently on the old General Hospital. His number is something, I don't remember, but it's those of you who've been in Kansas City a while, some of y'all might have been born in the old General Hospital, but the issue was the Black doctors simply just did not have the same facilities that they had in the white hospitals. We know that our diet has been the cause of so much of our health issues, and there's just been a lack of healthy foods in Black neighborhoods, which has caused us to suffer tremendously from treatable diseases. Of course, during COVID, this was all made so apparent because of some of the problems that we already had, made us susceptible to not only get COVID, but particularly dying from COVID. And then there's this issue of the intergenerational psychocultural, mental and spiritual damage of the post-traumatic slave syndrome. Cobra sponsored a study that was published about 2 months ago on this issue because it's really real how that psychological damage affects us today, from going all the way back in history, that it's evident today. So that's another one of the issues of healthcare. Responsible parties includes medical institutions, medical schools, state and local legislatures that enacted and upheld these discriminatory healthcare policies, and insurance providers. How to repair. We're talking about funds to establish free local Black controlled health and wellness centers, and also developing a pipeline programs to recruit young people from the Black community into health careers. Next, please. Another injury area is business development economics. And of course, we all know that because of the tremendous wealth gap, Black people have not had equal access to capital for business development. And this has created and exacerbated discriminatory policies of financial institutions, like lack of good jobs, disinvestment in the Black community. And I mentioned these so-called urban renewal programs, which basically destroyed so many Black businesses. Who's responsible? Financial institutions, local governments, not allowing Black business contractors to fully participate in taxpayer-funded projects. When I was working for the city, we had an affirmative action program where we actually had to put goals on city contracts to force a lot of the white construction companies to include Black contractors. And of course, we could do that with city money, but we could not do that with private companies. And again, you have private companies that basically use the good old boy network, and Black companies just don't get a chance to participate. And again, you'll see the list there of some ways to repair that damage. The final one, criminal justice. And this is another one that's very obvious, that Black folks have suffered at the hands of racist law enforcement for generations. We can see that in the high rate of police brutality among Black folks, the high incarceration rates, which have been duly noted over the last several years, over policing in Black communities, the racial profiling, bias in sentencing. Black folks get harsher sentences for doing the same things that whites did, even with the same criminal history. Cash bail has been a real problem because basically, if you can afford bail, you can get out of jail while you're waiting trial. If you can't afford a bail, you're stuck in jail. And when you're stuck in jail, you can lose your job, you can lose your home. Black folks have lost a lot because of cash bail. Who's responsible in Kansas City? Of course, we start with the police department. And of course, there's a lot of supposed changes going on in the department right now. The police union, the union has been thoroughly racist over the years, upholding a lot of the racist practices in the police department, the bonding agencies, etc., judges, prosecutors. How to repair that? Of course, a large part of the talk has been the change in the leadership. Our position is that the leadership can change, but if the entire police system does not change, it's not going to make that much difference. Community control of the police, and we're talking about real community control, not the local control that we hear a lot about, but where the actual communities control who polices their communities. They set budgets, they do hiring, firing, etc. We're talking about the reallocation of revenues from policing to community and economic development that's commonly known as defunding the police. A lot of folks don't like that term, defunding the police, but in effect, that's what we're talking about, taking money from the police and putting it in the community. I think the Urban Council just issued a letter today basically condemning the mayor for not doing what he had promised to do in terms of taking money away from the police. But those are just some of the things that we're talking about in criminal justice. So those are the 5 injury areas. And like I said, the role of the mayor's commission would be to examine all 5 of these areas, do a deep dive into not only what the problems are, but who caused them, and how do we get justice for those 5 injury areas. So that's what the commission is going to be working on. And right now we're working on putting that together. So finally, one of the things that came up early on was, what can you do? And this is really directed, I think, to some of you all in Trinity, and in particular people in the white community. Now, first thing I want to do is see if we can very, very briefly have some discussion about this first question. Y'all believe that Black people deserve reparations? And because I'm going to tell you that most white folks don't. In all of the polls, the majority of white people simply do not believe that Black people should get reparations. Now that figure has grown, but there's still resistance in the white community to Black reparations. So this is not a, this is a real question. I'm looking for an answer from some of y'all, like particularly from some of the whites here. Do you believe that Black people deserve reparations? Now, if you don't, it doesn't mean that you're racist or anything like that. It just basically means that we just have not. I think the problem in many instances is that we just have not done a good job of educating and really trying to educate people in terms of why Black people deserve reparations. So I'm just curious of the folks that are on here, and I'm talking particularly to some of the whites now. Do you believe that Black people deserve reparations, and why not? Why not? And this ain't judgmental at all. It's just trying to get your opinion on it. So let me hear something.
Yes, indeed.
I'll jump in and say absolutely, unquestionably, but only because the unquestionably comes from really being better informed more recently and having the particulars laid out. So I don't think there's anything new to me from your presentation that I haven't learned, but I have learned, I would say, probably over 50%, maybe up to 75% in the last 2 years.
And that's reasonable because it's really been in that period of time that this issue of reparations has come to the fore. But anyway, I'll just listen. Here's somebody else now. Yes, sir.
I would like to say that it just seems reasonable to have this happen because it raises everybody. And I don't think people look far enough along to see how it can help everybody.
That's a very good point because there was a study done, I can't say when, but within the last year that really showed how reparations to Black people would help the overall economy in this country, right? And that's something that I don't think has really been stressed enough, that as she said, that it would be a benefit to everybody in the country if Black people got reparations in all of its forms, because when you can eliminate a lot of that poverty, now you got more people contributing to the GNP, and it's just a benefit overall to the entire country. So anybody else want to speak up on that?
Yes, sir. I'd like to speak up. My video is off, but I've been enjoying this very much. And I was recently chatting with a friend who's Latino over dinner about the concept of reparations. And I actually made him choke on his food when I suggested that reparations might just be taken out of white people's paychecks. And I don't know that that would ever get any traction, but I believe that, it's feasible to consider. And I also think that it's unfortunate that we would have to present this as, reparations will help the entire economy and whites will also benefit. But unfortunately, it might be at this point where we have to begin and tap into white people's self-interest and then hopefully get some more traction and get a groundswell of support from those who would pivot away from the self-interest and just do this because it is the right thing to do.
Yeah. And again, reparations, as I said, would take many forms. Some of it would be financed by the government, but we're also looking at some of these other institutions that I mentioned this evening that have been responsible for damage to Black people, in terms of corporations, in terms of financial institutions, et cetera. I mean, I think they all should have some responsibility in this, in terms of the repair. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name's Michael. I live in Nebraska, and our Nebraska unicameral is in session right now, and we'll be finishing up in less than 10 days. But one of their discussions the last couple of weeks has been how to spend the dollars that are coming down from the feds to help with some of the issues since the pandemic. And we have two African-American state senators who worked very, very hard to get funds for their communities, North Omaha and South Omaha. Mm-hmm. And the little dab of money that has been approved to go that direction is just disgraceful. Money's being allotted to study building a new prison, to build a lake between Omaha and Lincoln, to dig a canal down to bring water from the South Platte River in Colorado into Nebraska, and that whole discussion gave me a new understanding of what reparations meant. We've screwed people over in recent history with redlining and the taking of land and cutting communities down the middle with interstate highways and that type of thing. It's sad. And
okay, all right. And I also want to add that and this is something that we won't get into tonight, but in terms of defining reparations and reparatory justice, there are certain policies, like we talk about things like Medicaid expansion, et cetera, that helps everybody. But when we talk about reparations, we are talking about reparatory justice directed specifically at Black people in this country. Because remember, we talked about the wealth gap, and these regular normal policies is simply not going to decrease that wealth gap. And that wealth gap didn't happen by accident. This was all purposeful by the government in terms of how the programs that really help to create wealth, you know, to buy homes and to get education, et cetera, how those were purposely denied to Black folks. Okay, so this all didn't happen by accident, you know, and so, you know, well, Black people just didn't work hard, and you know, those kind of things that we hear has nothing to do with this wealth gap. Okay, Matt, can you put that last slide back up for me, please?
1 second.
Okay, so what are some of the things that you can do? And of course, you all can be very, very creative in this. Here's just some suggestions. One is have a representative from Trinity join the KC Reparations Coalition. Now, this is something that I have to put an asterisk by, because our coalition, when it was formed, it's a Black coalition made up of Black people, okay? Most of the work, as I envision it, and this is something I got to present to the coalition, most of the work now in terms of developing proposals for reparation will shift to the mayor's commission. The coalition, as I see it, would then be a broad-based group in the city for anybody that supports Black reparations, okay? So you have a commission of Black people that will be working directly on the plan and the proposal for the city, and then we have a coalition that's open to everybody. I told Sam that one of the examples would be back in 1985, during the height of the anti-apartheid movement, we had what was called an anti-apartheid network that was made up of everybody in the city. And this was something that was initiated by Black United Front, but the network was made up of everybody in the city. We had labor people, we had farmers, church groups, anybody that opposed apartheid in South Africa. And so I'm envisioning this coalition being something similar to that, and giving everybody an opportunity. So you know, it's something that you know, Reverend Tex and Trinity can keep your eyes open for, because we would love, once we have an open coalition, we would love to have you in it. I would charge you all to organize at least 2 events among Kansas City's white population. These will be people that you know, organizations that you belong to, churches, I mean, well, this is your church, organizations that you belong to, anybody that you think it will be good to bring this message of reparations to in the white community. And those of us in the coalition will be glad to come do exactly what I'm doing tonight, talk about reparations, talk about what's happening in Kansas City, what we're trying to do, and how people can help. And these can be in person, it can be virtual, but if you want to help, I think that, see, my thing in terms of when it comes to Black people's struggle, what is the role of white people? And my thing is that the role of white people is to organize other white people, okay? Because I think that white people can organize white people better than we can organize white people, okay? So that's always my answer when white people say, what can we do to help your struggle? Then work on your own people, you know, try to organize your own people and bring them to the side of justice for Black people. Donate funds to the local reparations effort. We don't have an apparatus set up right now to do that, but that's one of the things that we're working on. And this is not funds for reparations. This is mostly funds, administrative type stuff for the kind of studies that we're going to have to get done. Of course, we're going to lean on the mayor for most of this, but we're also going to lean on corporations and individuals to help fund the kind of work that this commission is going to have to do. Educate yourselves on Black reparations. This is just, the tip of the iceberg tonight. I listed 3 sources that I think are very instructive. There are a number of them out there, but Ray Winbush's book, Should America Pay? Now, this book was written maybe 20 years ago, at least, but it has a lot of background information on Black reparations. It has arguments for reparations, some arguments against reparations, but it's a very excellent book to get started with on reparations. Samuel Darity And Kirsten Mullen wrote a book called From Here to Equality. Now there's some differences of opinion we have with Darity about reparations, but the documentation in his book is excellent, and it's another book that I recommend. And then there's a small book called The Black Tax by Sean Rochester, and it's an excellent book that basically shows you, and this is where I pull some of the numbers from in terms of what it has cost us being Black in America from the time of child slavery up until today. And it's another excellent resource. And then the final thing that I don't know if any of you all live in Sharice David's district or know her or have an influence, but right now, I think as Kamm mentioned, we have, I think, 190 some odd co-sponsors for HR 40. And we think we have enough other folks who are not co-sponsors that we think will vote, that will give us the 218 that we need. Sharice Davids, she's a Democrat, but she's not one of the co-sponsors. And I think a lot of that is for political reasons. I read some of her history. You know, she's Native. She did a lot of work, from my understanding, on reservations. So she's a person that I would think would be sympathetic to Black reparations, but I guess for political reasons. So we just want to make sure that when it comes to a vote, that she's going to vote with us. So those are some of the things that you know, if you're interested in really doing some things, those are things that you can do. And of course, those of us in the coalition, we're always available. You know, if there's anything that you want from us, any information you need from us, you know, we're always available to share that. Will, who's the male co-chair, he's on the line. I mean, he's on the call, and I'm sure he'll back me up on this, that we, you know, anything that you need from the coalition to help, we'll do it. So that's basically it for me. And I don't, if there's anybody has any questions about anything, I'll entertain them to the best of my ability.
Pastor Tex has a question.
Mr. Dean, I can promise you this, I'll take this to the next meeting of the Board of Trustees at Trinity, and also to the Justice Task Force that we got. We typically have at least what we call a point person who belongs to the community organizing efforts we're associated with, like Jobs with Justice, KC Tenants, Moore Square, and the Stand Up KC. We typically have somebody, you know, with each of those organizations. I will ask for that person for reparations, so that when you have that opportunity, let us know. I think surely we can do another educate. We had one study on critical race theory at Trinity about, what was that, 4 or 5 months ago, maybe 6. So we can probably, I can't speak for folks, but I would think we could have one. We have huddles. We call them the Kansas City huddles, where we deal with social issues. I don't know why one of our huddles couldn't deal with reparations, and that would give us the 2 you're talking about. In other words, I think we can respond to every one of those. I don't know that we've got anybody in the congressperson's district, but we can respond to every one of those, I think.
Appreciate that, Tex. Anything else from anybody?
I'd be curious to hear you respond to the question that comes from Nancy, I think, dealing with how does this idea of giving reparations to these former Africans, do we owe anything in addition to what we've already done as a nation for the Native population?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, of course, the decimation of Native people is what I call the original sin. You know, what's unfortunate is that, you know, this issue just doesn't come to the forefront because, you know, because of the decimation of those communities, the political clout and the political will is not there. But I think that we think that Native people are definitely deserving of reparatory justice. And we don't see their fight is in conflict with ours. I mean, if there's an issue over a particular land base, because we know that the land originally was theirs, that's something that we can work out with Native people. But we absolutely support justice for Native people for everything that has happened to them in this country. So yeah, I mean, if that answers the question, we're definitely allied with them in this struggle for justice, because we know this is a settler colonial state, the United States, and we know what they did to Native people, and so we're fully in support of their movement.
Reverend Williams has a question.
Yes, there were several people that answered that they truly believe in reparations. And one lady, I forget who it was, Yvonne, just said that someone choked when she talked about it. I'd like to hear why people don't believe in reparations, and what types of things they say to each other. I'm just curious. I guess no one wants to answer that. Okay.
I guess I would say
Well-
some of the conversations I've had is more because of oftentimes I don't think the conversation about race is even happening because of privilege, quite frankly. And so I think sometimes there's a lack of people having understanding, which becomes partially, at least in my opinion, white people's responsibility to help show people the need per se of, at least if you're going to talk about with white people about reparations, and kind of just helping guide and create dialogue about it. And I think it's just a lack of education, and a lot of it is.
Yeah, I think so too, because I was just remembering, I have a friend who lives out, he's a farmer, and somehow we got to talking about that, and he said, well, I didn't have any slaves. I don't have to take care of anybody. Wasn't me.
And that's one of the arguments that we hear. Well, you weren't a slave, and I didn't own any slaves. Okay, so why should I, why should I be involved in this at all? And I think that what people need to understand is that everything that I've talked about in terms of the damage to the Black community resulted from the legacy of being enslaved in this country. Okay. I mean, if they just given us the 40 acres, I don't think we'd be having this discussion. But I think that all of the stuff that we've talked about, I mean, up through the Jim Crow era, up to now, all of that is a legacy from slavery, because Black folks have never really been seen as full human beings and citizens of America. That's one of the things that Malcolm X said, is that you're not a citizen until you are treated the same as everybody else. And this is something that has been throughout our history. So it's not just the issue of slavery. And that's why I tried to go through historically to talk about how we're not just talking about a check from what happened in slavery. Now, that is one of the issues that's being debated right now in terms of eligibility of slavery. I mean, should it be based on lineage? In terms of, can you trace your history back? If you can't do that, then you're left out. That's something we're gonna have to resolve, and I definitely don't want to get into that tonight. But and it's the same as again, talk to you about all of the advantages. Okay, historically, going back to the Homestead Act, through the New Deal programs that benefited whites. Go back and study that, and just see how it was that whites have 10 times the net wealth that Blacks. Now, I know that there are a lot of whites in this country that have been victimized because I've studied labor history, and capitalists, they'll I mean, they'll destroy anybody that gets in the way of profit. Okay, you go back and look at the history of some of the bloody labor struggles early in this country, when the unions were just being formed, and what white capitalists did to white union organizers and coal miners and so forth. I mean, so I'm not saying that all white people are tremendous beneficiaries, but I think that, and that's why I think that I support a lot of social movements against exploitation and against oppression, because the unfortunate thing is a lot of white people don't really understand who their enemy is, right? Because of racism, they're convinced that the problem is Black people, getting this and getting that, and it's taken from them. And of course, it's beneficial to the power structure to keep us separated, keep us divided. And so you got one group of people with little to no resources fighting another group of people with little to no resources, right? But this whole thing about class unity is very difficult, because the capitalists in this country have done a very good job of driving a wedge and making sure that one group is just a little bit better than the other group. And therefore, if this group is elevated, then somehow it's going to adversely affect that group. And they've been very effective in that. But I think that again, everybody should support everybody's battle against oppression. And just like I think that white people should support Black people's demand for reparations, I support working class white folks against exploitation by the ruling class in this country. So and what would really be something if we could all get together against the haves against the have-nots, but race is really a big factor in that not happening.
Reverend Williams has another question.
I think my other question dealt with, first I want to thank Brother Mickey for his work, and he has been a wonderful guide to us on the committee and where and how we need to do some of the work. And there are others also that have worked with him, and he's just been very patient with us. I'd also like to thank Brother Sam Mann. He was one of the initial subcommittee members with me. And also to you, Reverend Tex. And I thank you for offering Trinity. But when the question was asked, how could and where would you guys enter into? I'm thinking about religious institutions, not just United Methodist churches or all the other churches that you have inroads into as white people, because many people still say that the most segregated hour time in the United States is 11 o'clock hour on Sunday. And even though we've had a lot of virtual services, there's still things that we can do or you can do to bring together this fight for reparations. And then in our seminaries, I know I attended St. Paul School of Theology, and I know they have a lot of community engaged learning practices that they do. And so those are areas that you can, and I would think you might want to start if you're talking about social justice and religious theories. I don't want to say religious debates, but religious theories. If you're going to say you're a Christian, what's Christianity say about human rights and slavery? Bring that to the forefront. And I understand that families may not want to discuss it. Maybe it's too hard to bring to the forefront, but we're going to do our work. But we know that sometimes it takes all of us working together to fight oppression.
By the way, Reverend Carmen is a very, very important part of our coalition. She's been with us from the beginning, and we appreciate her work on the commission, on the coalition.
Awesome. And we've got Reverend Esther Hosendorf. I don't want to forget my mom, my friend.
Reverend Esther is a long-time warrior. I think Reverend Esther just turned about 65 or 70, but she's still out there, so, and we appreciate her.
Thank you. Yeah, been on this road a long time.
Anything else? Brother Will, did you have something?
A quick point there, Bobby, if I could have a hand raised there a second, but I do also want to extend that thank you to Sam Mann, for opening up this conversation here, to Baba Mickey for facilitating the dialogue, and Reverend Tex for being there as well throughout that Urban Summit and everything. I don't know, Sam, man, if you actually know of Beverly Jones, but that was my grandmother. She knew you years back, but so I've always heard the name, through either her or my pops coming up. But just to offer a point of dialogue for the woman that said that she, speaking with some people and points of contention that come up. I do want to offer that we are only 157 years out of the ending of the enslavement of Blacks. And so we have to look at that objectively. Living on this earth, my 32 years, I feel like it's double, but we actually understand what 50 years is on this planet, and really 50 years is a snap of the fingers. So what we're talking about is three generations of we're out of enslavement from 3 generations. So this isn't far stretching or far reaching. In actuality, it's very recent. And so, when you're talking with people and they say, these audacious comments, or such, then, you can just bring them back to a perspective that really, 50 years is a snap of the fingers. And so when you look at, say you purchase a house, right? Say you purchase a house as a young family, okay? You raise your family, they have kids. Lo and behold, they end up having, another 20 years goes by, they end up having another set of kids. This is how quickly these generations go by. And 150 years, you actually have a vast amount of resources still located within those family structures throughout that time span. So just point of contention, I also want to say thanks. And so that's it.
Reverend Tex, if there's nothing else, I'll turn it back over to you, and thanks again for inviting us. We really appreciate it.
Well, Mr. Dean, you've honored us by your presence. We really do appreciate it. And before I say a final word of thanks, Reverend Mann, do you want to make a comment before that? You're muted, I believe.
About now, am I
There you
muted?
go. There you go.
I want to thank my brother and friend, Mickey Dean, for the magnificent job he did. Not only with his words, but with his feet and legs and body. He is indeed one who practices what he preaches. I also want to thank Trinity for giving some new life to this old project that has meant so much to me. I want to remind everybody that this started in 1997. What's happening these days is not just something that's happening today. It's something that's has grown out of the movement, evolved, emerged out of the Black struggle for freedom in America. And I just want to thank Trinity for bringing this moment for reframing the dialogue. I know that our brother Mac Jones is happy. He's happy, and all those saints who have walked this path. And thank you, Trinity, for giving the platform for this.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Mann. And again, Mr. Dean, so really appreciate this. And I made you a promise, and I will follow through on that promise. We will find ways to support this. If you want to see previous sessions of this, Matt in the chat section has already given you a direct link there so that you can know how to see this presentation tonight, but the previous 3 presentations are also available. Plus, we had a very nice job done on critical race theory by Dr. Antonio Bird, a professor at UMKC, African-American. That's also there, I think, for public use. So, and there are other things. A person in our church who works in housing did a fine job on affordable housing here last year. So, if you look at our websites, you might find a number of things there that we'll be working on. I'm going to be doing a piece here in another few weeks entitled "A Christian Justice of the Common Good." So there are some resources there. We invite you to make use of them at any time. But finally, again, thank you so very much, Mr. Dean, and thank all of you for being with us tonight. We appreciate it very much.
Brother Tex,
Yes, sir.
I forgot what I was going to say. I've grown old. Oh, I want to thank Matt Brown for stepping up
Absolutely.
the way he did, because there was a staff member who has committed herself in a real way, Reverend Nia Chandler Howard from St. Mark's Church, who had a health issue that she had to take care of and had to drop out. But Matt stepped up, and I want to thank him for his willingness to participate and to orchestrate and to organize all of these cyberspace technical stuff, which is absolutely foreign to me.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Matt.
Yes, indeed, Matt. Matt is on our staff at Trinity Church. So again, thank you all so very much, and good night to all.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
God bless us.